Welcome, everybody. I'm Robert Wilonsky, the Communications Director here at Heritage Auctions. I'm joined by Aaron Piscopo, who's got one of the coolest jobs here at Heritage. He's the king of guitars. Hey, Aaron.
How you doing, Robert? Thanks
Good.
for having me.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
I'm very excited. We're going to talk about the state of the guitar market, which has been extraordinary over the last year and a half. If you have a question for Aaron, feel free to post it here on the live video stream. And if you have a question that is something you don't want to put your name on, if it's an anonymous question, a provocative question, feel free to email that to tommyn@ha.com. The man directing this show will send us those questions. But man, you and I have been talking a lot in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Certainly just got done with the Neal Schon Collection just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, no, and that was a big success. So it did about 4.3 million. So it was good, just over 100 lots sold. So very happy with that result. So
that was pretty fun. It was interesting to get to know Neal a little bit. If you had told me when I was 12 years old that I'd be talking to Neal Schon or texting him, well, if you told me at 12 that I'd be texting him, I wouldn't know what the hell you were talking about. But that said, my neighbors were all very excited about the fact that the guy we grew up listening to over the last, 40 years was someone I could text and they could talk to. My next door neighbor actually has a Neal Schon guitar head little button that Neal gave him in 1983.
Huh, that's cool.
So he was very excited to know that Neal Schon was talking to somebody who lived 2 houses down the street from him.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting, very cool. Flew up to San Francisco. We met him a few times. We went to his warehouse, and just walking through that warehouse is, that's mind-boggling alone. And then just his vintage collection. We only touched the surface. He's got about a collection of 600 guitars in that warehouse. And we did, just over 100 of them. So, yeah, I was thrilled to meet him as well. He's got some iconic work.
And obviously, we sold his iconic 77 Les Paul that was used on Escape, Don't Stop Believing, and all of those songs played at the Forum in 1981.
Yeah,
that concert that I remember seeing on MTV that became one of the most iconic concert broadcasts and DVDs of the last 40 years.
Yeah, live in Houston. Yeah.
So we'll get a little bit to Neal stuff in a second because I kind of want to talk about, because we can break down Neal's right into 2 sort of categories: the celebrity owned, the professionally played, the stage played, the studio played the guitar, and then we get into the vintage guitars. And obviously we have some stuff here. But before we do anything, you and I've worked with you for 18 months. You and I've done a couple of these before, not together, not with a guitarist sitting with us, and we'll talk about these. But what I wanted to ask you first was, you're a musician.
I do play, yes, sir.
So what do you play? How many guitars do you have?
I've got about, I think, 12 in my collection right now. I consider myself a bass player, so I've got about 3 basses. I try to expand, try to be very well-rounded. So I've got a lap steel at home. I've got a banjo. I've got basses, a couple acoustic guitars, electric. So I also play drums in a band right now. Kind of just getting started, but we're playing.
What's the name of your band?
I'm an active musician.
But what's the name of your band?
Wolfjaw. So it's kind of a heavy metal band.
Yeah, plays around Dallas-Fort Worth.
We have. During the pandemic, we haven't been, so we're kind of back up again. But yeah, so we practice once a week. We try to. People getting older, people having families now, but it's kind of a hobby, but we like it. So.
When you say it's a metal band, sort of where on the metal spectrum do you fall?
On the heavier side, so we like, fans of Pantera.
I was about to say
like
Pantera side, Pantera being from this area as well.
Pantera, bands like Entombed, things like that. So a little more on the heavier side. So
yeah,
it's interesting. So next time we're out, we'll let you know.
Please do.
Yeah, definitely.
There are several musicians who work here at Heritage.
Yeah.
So when did you first pick up a guitar? I remember as a kid, I took guitar lessons. I hated my guitar lessons because my guitar teacher, like 2 days in, made me try to learn very complicated songs. I fell out of love with playing because it was just very difficult. I had a hard time getting my fingers into it. But
yeah,
how did you pick it up?
My dad always had guitars lying around the house, as decoration, and then also, they're playable guitars. So he would pick them up, just Saturday afternoon, playing guitar. And it would even got to the point where, me and my brother growing up, we'd wake up on a Saturday morning and we woke up to him playing, which when you were that young, it was kind of annoying. You wanted to sleep in. But now in hindsight, I'm very appreciative of it. So there was instruments at my fingertips. So I could walk through the house, a different room, pick up a different guitar. So I actually started playing probably when I was in 7th grade or so. Got together with a few guys in the neighborhood in middle school, and we started playing together. I learned to play bass. I just had a guitar, so kind of just did the top 4 strings. An easier way to learn to play bass, or if you can't really play guitar yet, you can try to play bass. But
everybody who can't play guitar eventually tries to play bass, and either you get really good at it and you stick with it, or like me, you just say, I'm going to leave it to somebody who's a little bit more professional than I am.
And you can play bass. You can get by with just playing single notes on bass, but then you can go down the rabbit hole and you can start to walk and you can explore and slap and things like that. So there's a lot to do on a bass besides just playing the core notes. I mean, you obviously want to keep the rhythm, but you can expand on that.
You have a stand-up?
We've got a few in the auction. I don't own one, but we're going to have one in November. Might actually have 2 in November, but either one in November and then the spring. But I've got 2 in the warehouse right now.
Really?
So it's pretty cool.
My son was played stand-up for a while. He when he was like 8.
Oh yeah.
I introduced him to Charles Mingus. Thought, all right, go do that. Let's see if you can do that. Because what I wanted to sort of get at here was the fact that, as someone who wrote about music for years, as I did, I adored, I appreciated, I revered musicians. I found it to be sort of a magical talent. And you look at it and you think, well, this can't be that hard. Certainly, the Ramones could play the guitar, so how come I can't play the guitar? But at the same time, I sort of wonder, at what point did you decide, this is the thing that I love, this is the thing my father taught me to do, that I want to do, I'm doing in 7th grade with my buddies, to become someone who knows intimately the history, the backstories, everything from the pickups to what's on these guitars, and how did that evolve? And talk to me about your love of these instruments.
Well, like I said, grew up playing, so anytime you have the opportunity to be around something you love, I mean, you take that opportunity. So I went to Stephen F. Austin. I graduated from there with a history degree, and then I started teaching out of school, actually. So
really,
it's kind of funny where you end up. But I was a 3rd grade teacher for a little while, and then I started working at Heritage when I had the summers off as a teacher, and kind of got in here and just kind of saw what this world could be, and kind of stuck with that. And then Heritage provided a lot of opportunities for me, so I ended up moving out to California and managing their wine warehouse, doing the logistics for that department. And then I got the phone call that the guitar gig had opened up, so got to come back to Dallas and work with the guitars. That was a no-brainer on both fronts. So been doing it ever since. Kind of haven't looked back. And like I said, if you get the opportunity to do something you enjoy, you love, and you consider a hobby, that's I'm very rewarded in it.
When did you start studying them, learning about them? Because at a certain point, you have to become a scholar about these. You have to know what you're holding. You have to know how they've been altered. You have to know the conditions. Certainly the backstories of some of these instruments is remarkable. And especially as we've grown the vintage category, there are any number of remarkable makers, stories, and players that have been involved in these instruments over the years.
Sure. I think it just kind of comes with the territory, and over time you pick up a real instrument and something that's known to be real, and you study that, you feel it, you hold it, you smell it, you understand what it feels like, the weight and the subtle variances in a known authentic instrument, and you can compare that to something that's not that, and you just kind of compare and contrast, and then you build up notes and a track record, just going through it. And it's just experience is all it is. It's taking a guitar and, okay, this is a real deal, and taking those notes and memorizing them with your head, if you will, and just say, okay, this is what a real guitar feels like, sounds like, plays like, versus you can pick up a knockoff and there are good knockoffs, but if you pick up one and you can it doesn't feel right, it doesn't look right, there's those telltale signs. But it just comes with holding guitars and looking at them day after day. And we've got, we use Dave Henson of Killer Vintage. He owns Killer Vintage here in Dallas and St. Louis. So he'll come in and, double check all the guitars for us. So he's quite the authority on electric guitars and amplifiers. So he helps us write the catalog. So, and coming from him, he's got, 50 plus years experience, and he'll tell you the same thing. It's just a matter of just doing it over and over again and figuring out, okay, we know that this is real, and just kind of memorizing what is in that guitar, and then comparing, contrasting with other examples that you see.
You remember the first guitar you fell in love with, the first guitar you held and went, all right, this is magic?
I'm a fan of an SG. I think we had, I remember when I first got the gig, came back to Dallas to work with guitars. There was just like a 61 SG Les Paul, you know, and I wasn't too familiar with, when you say Les Paul, you think of your classic Les Paul, you know, like some of the bursts that we just sold. But before that, you know, they had the 61s, or after that actually. So the 61s and the 63s, they look like SGs. And I remember just kind of picking that up and just the action on that and how far up you're able to go and hit those high notes. It just, you could see why Angus Young loved an SG, people like that. So, I mean, it's just a very fast guitar. And I remember thinking, like, you just feel like you're better holding something like this.
It also looks like a demon's head.
No, it's a very satanic looking guitar. So, yeah, the Doors, Angus Young, so lots of stuff with an SG.
Was some of your love for and interest in and awareness of these instruments based upon who played them, based upon the fact that, you know, hey, I know what Angus likes, I know what Clapton plays, I know what Hendrix played, and sort of, you know, that was sort of my template for what was an important instrument based upon who played it and if it was on one of my favorite records.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got the 10 Years album after, like the live 10 Years album after, and then just going back and doing some research on Alvin Lee and his Big Red. So just falling in love with a big 335 like that and seeing other people play a big bodied guitar like that, but playing fast and playing rock and roll on it was cool to me. And then, I don't know, I'm a big fan of Lou Reed and things like that. So he, you know.
You're a big Lou Reed fan.
I do like Lou Reed a little bit.
Well, that's, you and I should talk later about our love for Lou Reed.
No, definitely. I would enjoy that very much. So rest in peace. But hopefully we can start getting more of his stuff. But, you know, he's a fan of a Telecaster, you know, in a 335. I'm a cover Transformer. So guitars like that. I do make that connection, but that's not something that I am drawn to the guitar with, you know, right away. But I do make that connection after the fact and kind of, you know, respect that, if you will, I guess.
So let's talk about the fact that over the last year and a half, the guitar market has really exploded. Certainly the vintage guitar market, and we'll get to some of that with the Neal stuff. But I assume that some of that has had to do with the fact that people were home. They were picking up instruments that perhaps they had let sit by the wayside. They maybe wanted to expand their collection to extend their sound. And did you see that that was in fact the case, that people being home over the last year made them fall in love with their instruments all over again?
We did. I think, you know, we had people, like you said, people sitting at home during the pandemic, going through their inventory and then realizing what they didn't use anymore were kind of over with. So, you know, some people go through phases. Now they want acoustics versus electrics, that type of things, or they're collecting D28s versus OM guitars. So they had the opportunity to go through their inventory, figure out what they wanted to keep, what they wanted to get rid of, and then what they had room for, you know, what they needed to expand on. So we found that during the pandemic in the last year and a half, there was an uptick in bidding. We've got also an uptick in consignments too. So the market's strong. There's lots of people bidding, lots of people consigning right now, and we hope that lasts. But we do feel that it was people being at home kind of, and a guitar is, you know, when you're at home, that's the perfect thing to do. You know, you can sit there and play it. You can work, you can look at it. It's I mean, it's a very well-rounded decoration.
I did hope that during the pandemic I would have learned to play an instrument. I was not one of those so inclined nor fortunate to have spent that time wisely. When you said consignments, there was an uptick in consignments. What were people bringing that you maybe hadn't seen before? Were there new instruments entering the market that had not been previously available?
Well, we've had a big surge in Martins. So the last 2 or 3 auctions, we've had a 6-figure Martin come through. So those collectors are out there waiting, and so we've had Martins come through before, but not just this steady on a regular basis. And once you know, we did the 37 D28 last auction for just over $281,000, and yeah, people, you know, calling me, emailing, I've got this, you know, and some guitars have work done, some don't, but pre-war Martins are pretty hot, and there's a very strong market for them.
So let's, I wanted to talk about and go back to Neal's auction for a minute, because it was so significant and so interesting because it was so varied. There were 10 guitars, I believe, in that auction that sold for 6 figures.
Correct.
And they were vintage guitars with the, you know, with the exception of the Don't Stop Believin' guitar. And I guess we'd consider that vintage. 77's a vintage guitar.
It's getting up there, yeah.
I'm born just 9 years earlier, and I'm certainly vintage. So
I apologize. No.
But talk to me about the fact that, you know, the Les Paul burst, obviously, we sold 2 of those in this auction,
Yeah.
and they did remarkably well. And I assume that didn't surprise you. But even I was a bit taken aback by the prices, 300 and 350,000 respectively.
Well, it's those are every bit of what we wanted to get for those guitars. It's what they're worth. It's fair market price for them. We just had 2 of them, in one auction, and it's had opening bids of I think 100,000 and 150,000 on them. So those are steals at that price. But to try to sell 2, holy grails in one auction, it was a little bit nerve wracking. But we had lots of interest on them. So in the beginning, we were a little nervous about it, putting 2, and we maybe talked to Neal about if he wanted to spread one out or maybe potentially put it in another auction, or if we could try to find a private treaty for it. But once we got them out there, the buzz was pretty good, and we felt confident that we can get it done. And sure enough, they did what they were supposed to. So that was we were very impressed with that. So.
Was there something particularly special about those guitars, other than the fact that they were owned by Neal? Certainly, these are, as you and I've discussed several times over the last several months, these are holy grail guitars. These are, the Jimmy Page guitars. Certainly, I assume that do people look at who owned them, who has played them? Does the provenance, the fact that they were from Neal's collection, factor into that price as well?
I would say a little bit. I mean, even without Neal's, celebrity provenance attached to those, people are going to want those guitars. Those are the vintage collectible guitars. Like I said, that's the holy grail. I think the fact that he owned them, and they were from his collection, that just provided the provenance for it, the paper trail that, another, renowned collector had already bought this guitar. So Neal had already done the work for somebody in terms of vetting the instrument and things like that. I think we maybe got a couple extra bids because of the Neal celebrity factor. Gary Granger owned one before, so one of those bursts was already celebrity-esque guitar. Gary Granger's guitar player for Rod Stewart, and that guitar has been around. People in the industry know that guitar. They recognize it. They know the serial number. I've had people walk up to me at the guitar show and said, I used to own that guitar. So it's traded hands quite a bit. And I mean, people still want it. And it's still sought after. And that doesn't diminish the fact, the value of the guitar that it's traded hands so many times. If anything, it kind of increases it.
I was going to say, that also is a fascinating part of what you do, because a lot of these guitars do trade hands. They're traded for other guitars. They're sold for any number of interesting or boring reasons, but the interesting reasons are certainly legendary when it comes to why a guitar went from one person to another, certainly if their fame or infamy precedes them.
Mm-hmm.
But I sort of do wonder, does that, how much that factors into this? Because these guitars don't just have a sound, but they certainly tell a story.
Yeah. So it's like I said, they're looking to trade. So if you were collecting Martins or let's say 335s at one point, and then your music style starts to change, things like that, people that want to swap something out. If you've got X amount of 335s or 355s, maybe now you want to go down the Les Paul road or the SG road. So you swap a few of those out, and it's just kind of a revolving door and a never-ending game or story, if you will. But and that's the beauty of it. You can have something, it still holds its value. God forbid you don't drop it or anything like that. But you can own that guitar, play it, love it, and it'll hold its value. And then as soon as you're tired of it, if you will, you can go down another collecting route and swap it out for something that has even more value, or, something that's closer to your heart, and it still holds that value. So
when people come to you and ask you for guitars, when they look through the catalogs as auctions become open, or even when they're consigning, and you're certainly still accepting consignments for the next auction, correct? Sure. And if people need to get a hold of you about that, aaronp@ha.com.
That's correct.
But what interests me about all of this is when they come to you and say, I'm looking, how much do people come to you and say, I'm looking for this, let me know when you get this. I'm looking for this year, I'm looking for this model, I'm looking for this particular sound. How much, what are those calls like?
I do get that a little bit, but Heritage, our website is excellent. We've got that want list, so I encourage clients to go in, and if you're looking for a 57 Strat, go ahead and put that on your want list, and I'll take note of it too. So whenever I do get stuff like that, I try to remember those clients and reach out and say, here's a batch we've got coming up. I've let a few people know about about the OM45 we've got coming up, some of our Martin collectors. So
show folks that OM, because it's I'm not sure if they can see it behind the table, but talk to me about this guitar. And this is in the tell folks when the next auction is.
all right, so next auction is going to be November 7th. Deadline for that auction is September 9th. So still got a few weeks to get some guitars in that auction if you've got anything. But this is a pre-war Martin 1931 OM45, fancy inlay, the OM body shape, smaller body shape, but it's just on the rare side. It's a very rare, and it's an OM45. So the higher number you go with Martins, the fancier detail you get. So those are higher sought after. It's got a few cosmetic issues, but the guitar is still structurally sound. It is what it is, and OM45s from that era they're rare and they're sought after.
When you say they're rare, how rare?
As in, there's a handful of these made in 1931. I think they made about roughly 10 or so in that year. So when you find them, and that's in fairly good condition. Like I said, it has a few cosmetic issues, but I mean, it shines like a show dog and presents well. So to find one in that condition, that's, we expect that to, get $70,000 to $90,000 for a guitar like that.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, look, we'll get back to Neal's guitar in a minute, because I do want to go back to the 77 Les Paul, but I do want to go back to the April auction, because that was a significant auction in terms of Martins, correct?
Yeah, we did the 1937, sold for $281,000, so it was very good. And the auction before that, we sold the 1934 D28 for $118,000. So we look to continue that trend with this OM45 here. And like I said, in terms of getting calls, once we sold that the 34 and then the 37, got that phone call, and then we've got a few consigners on the line who have large Martin collections who are looking to expand, but also thin out, and not thin out in terms of getting rid, but just so they can, have more inventory in the long run.
I was going to say, that's kind of the interesting thing that I've discovered over the last year and a half of being here, is why people, sell their guitars. Somebody asked me recently about why Neal was selling so many guitars. It's because he has several hundred, and he was going to use that to buy other guitars. I mean, people.
No, he's not done by any means.
Yeah.
It's just a means to get more, or to start over, or go down a different avenue of the collecting spectrum, if you will. So,
but that's a lot of this, right? I mean, guitar collectors are fascinating to me. I have so many friends who are musicians who collect guitars. They build their collection around. Some build their collections around makes. Around, certainly they want a Martin. Sure. They wanted a pre-war Martin. They want a sound. When you look at that guitar, certainly I assume the thing you're thinking about is not just how good it looks, but how good it sounds.
No, and that's what people are paying for a lot of the time too. I mean, the craftsmanship in Martins, early Martins like that, that's second to none. But just the sound quality you get out of guitars like that, people compare them, and if you look in the price guide of guitars, when you're looking at guitars like that, it'll say, price is reflective of sound quality. So we encourage people to come by, strum the guitars. We have these on display before the auction. You can make appointments to come in and view them. But a big seller, and especially acoustic guitars, is how it sounds. It's how it resonates. It's like that.
As someone who used to live across the street from the Sunset Boulevard Guitar Center, where folks would plug in their guitars on the sidewalk during Saturday afternoons, I'm always sort of enamored of and feared of that the sound of all those guys playing guitars at the same time. When folks come in to play, what kind of conversations do they have with you in terms of they come and look at a guitar? I assume somebody might come in and look at this Martin and say, all right, I want that because of the year. But then I assume they may look at other guitars and say, I want something that has this particular sound, right?
Yeah. So especially with Martin collectors, people are like, I need a 31, to fill out my collection. I need a 32. If you're a D28 collector, somebody checked it off with that 34, and then, you want a 37. So collectors are buying by vintage and then by sound quality. So when somebody comes in, they have a guitar like that checks off, one of the boxes. So that's what gets them in the door. It's okay. They check out the sound quality on something like that. But then while they're here, that's right next to them. Say, well, I've also, been looking for, a Trini Lopez bottle. So let me see how this feels in my hand. You hear from a lot of clients or bidders that, I've got one of these, but it's just, it just doesn't sound right anymore, or it's lost its, it's lost its feel in the fingerboard, things like that. Or people who are looking like, oh, I had one of these guitars when I was 16. People are looking to, for nostalgic reasons, rebuy what they had, their first guitar, things like that. For some reason, either got stolen at a gig when they were younger, or they, unwillingly sold it, for whatever reason, and now they're in a position to where they want it back. So looking through the guitar magazines and things like that, there's wanted ads in the back that are, like, lost this guitar when I was 16, still looking for it. No, it's a long shot, but people are hunting stuff like that down.
Are there particular guitars to that end? I'm fascinated by that because, look, I had so many friends when I was a kid who had the Sears guitars. They all wish they had their Sears.
Mm-hmm.
They ain't cheap these days.
No, we've sold a few auctions ago, but yeah, if they have the Sears box with them too, people like that. It comes in the original cardboard box, and that's just you can still pick up and play those guitars, but those, I think, are, the nostalgic thing. Somebody wants to display that in some way or form. But
they do make great artwork to have in the house. That's the thing that I have been to any number of friends, and I'm probably guilty of this as well. I love having my 3 guitars. My son plays them, so they're being used. But when he goes to college tomorrow, I'm still going to have those 3 guitars out because I just love looking at those guitars.
No, I'm the same way. In my house, I've got an acoustic and a bass out in the living room. I've got another guitar back in my home office. So it's there's always something around. It's always good to just pick it up and keep your fingers fresh. And you can, look at emails and stuff while doing that. And it's also research. You need people call in all the time and say, how does this guitar feel? How does it sound? What's the neck radius? So I give them dimensions and specifics, but also people want to know my thoughts on it and stuff like that. And so I'll be on the phone with somebody and just kind of playing it. Sound quality through the phone is not the best, but they get my reaction and my thoughts to it and things like that.
You want to play the Martin?
Martin's not tuned up right now, and we keep guitars like that out of tune just for humidity reasons. Yeah. But those 2 should be tuned up if you want to strum one.
I'm not going to strum anything because I'm not silly enough to do it on camera. I won't even do it in private these days. That's how awful I've gotten at playing guitar. But it is interesting because I want to go back for a second to the Neal auction, because that 77 Les Paul, the deluxe that Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, bought. He also bought, just 2 weeks prior to that, Elton John's touring piano. Certainly he's putting together a fascinating music museum.
Oh, yeah.
Owning some of the most iconic instruments and other historical items over the last century or so. And I am fascinated by the fact that how much of that have you seen is becoming more and more important in terms of, certainly celebrity-owned guitars have sold in the last several years for significant amounts of money. Is that a different collector from somebody who wants to own the best sounding pre-war Martin they can get their hands on?
I think it is. I mean, I think it can be the same collector. I mean, somebody who knows something that has value, somebody like Jim Irsay, if he saw he was bidding on, I believe he was bidding on one of the Les Pauls. But, he sees value in a guitar like that as well, even though that's not so much on the celebrity side.
The 59.
Yeah. So something like that, he's going to want to have that in his collection as well, just because of the value and, he knows what he's buying, things like that. There's also the other hand of it. So I do people who are just into the celebrity. They're not musicians, they're not guitar players, or they might be, but they're into the celebrity side of things. That holds a lot of value for them. And like, they're not going to pick it up. They're not going to want to play it or gig it out or anything like that. It's just something that resonates with them. Maybe the big Don't Stop Believin' fans, or, if you're a big Alvin Lee fan, you might go after his big red guitar, things like that, just because of what it is and how iconic that instrument is. And to say that I've got it, right now for this point in time, and the history of that instrument. So the David Gilmour stuff, things like that, the Black Strat, that's which Irsay also bought. That guitar has a lot of history. So, and it's on Pink Floyd albums. So just to say that you've got that, and just to put on a Pink Floyd album and make that kind of connection, or to put on the Escape album and make that connection with Neal's guitar, that resonates with a lot of people. And there is there is value in that. And Irsay bought Elton's piano. He's bought a lot of things from us. Prince guitar. He's
Right.
bought before one of the Yellow Cloud guitars. But
Well, what about, because look, I'm so fascinated by whenever I see an instrument come through here that it's iconic. Kirk Hammett's guitar from the one video, for instance, that's a guitar I've seen a million times, heard countless times. When something like that happens, and I think that sold for 112,000 in April.
correct. Yep.
When I saw that, and that's one reason I came to Heritage a year and a half ago, was to be around history, hold these historic instruments that were part of these iconic moments. So when Hammett's guitar comes up, first of all, when that comes in, that must be an extraordinary thrill for you to realize that you're, for this moment, the custodian and of that guitar, and able to make it available to somebody who's going to really, really want it.
Yeah, no, it's very rewarding, and then you start doing your research on it, and that wasn't very hard. You pull up the one video on that, and you kind of see it, and it's just like when it all clicks, and it's a no-brainer like that. It's very exciting. About, oh, wow, this is right here in front of me. I'm holding it, and it was there, and that so many other people are, have seen that music video and fell in love with that song. So it's something special when you get to do that. Yeah.
When these guitars, and I guess I'm asking that in as much as that you're sitting next to a guitar signed by the members of Van Halen, right? That's there's Eddie's signature right there, his unmistakable signature.
Yeah, man, Eddie, Alex, Sammy Hagar, Michael Anthony.
Yeah. And that's available in the next auction.
Yeah, that'll be November 7th. Yes, sir.
So talk to me about the celebrity signed guitar, the interest in, the value of, versus the celebrity played guitar, the musician played. I shouldn't just say celebrity. They are artists. They are talented, gifted, often genius musicians. So, that is a work that I assume that something like that, a signed guitar by the entire band, is a trophy piece for somebody. I don't think you're certainly not going to play that, right?
I wouldn't advise it. You might start rubbing away the signatures, but it's a very playable guitar. But something like this, where I think somebody's going to buy it for the display and the signatures. They're not going to buy it because they want a Jackson to go out and gig with.
Right.
We might have a Jackson that can be up that alley for you, but this one, no, you're just going to want to maybe put in a nice shadow box, or you don't even have to do that. Just kind of hang it on the wall, behind your computer or in your office or whatever the case may be in your man cave, and that's that. And it's just nice, big, bright signatures. So that's kind of what you're looking for there. In terms of the value of it, it's on a guitar, so it's on a cool thing to display versus just a signed photograph, which is also cool in its own right. But it's, I think, hanging a guitar, it's a 3D piece of art, if you will, and then the signatures pop on it. So it's a story piece, it's a conversation piece.
But in the time I've been here, we've sold a couple of Frankenstrats that Eddie actually had his hands in and hands on. I mean, so certainly is that a different collector? Is the person buying a Frankenstrat, and obviously they sell for an incredible amount these days. Even before Eddie's death, they sold for a lot. But do you find that the person who's buying a Frankenstrat is buying it to play it, buying it to just display it, buying it to just say, I own one of Eddie's guitars?
It's to say that I own one, one of Eddie's guitars, and to display it, and for the history that's involved with that. And I think it just doubles up the fact that you could pick it up and you could play it for a little bit. Again, whether or not you should be taking it out and gigging with it or something like that, that's between you and the guitar. But
have you ever seen anybody? Have you ever gone somewhere and seen somebody gigging with a Frankenstrat?
I have not. No,
I have never either.
No, no, and they make the reissue ones and things like that, so you can buy one that's meant to go out and be played. But I just think, if you've got something like that on, you better be pretty good and be ready to play Eruption. So it's a bold statement. Taking a guitar like that out on stage. So.
And I should also mention up front that you're obviously not just the king of guitars, but certainly the lord of musical instruments at Heritage Auctions. Yeah. We did sell that Ludwig drum kit recently that Buddy Rich had gifted to Johnny Carson. Actually, I think Johnny played it in his house. Johnny was a great drummer. Yeah,
Johnny had it set up in his living room in his Malibu home. So there's the whole backstory on that. But
sold for $113, I believe.
Yep. The drum set had value on its own. So there's a nice vintage drum set but also the fact that it was played by Buddy Rich and then Johnny Carson too. So that's two celebrity factors involved. But I think what really got those drums going was the fact that they were vintage drums. And then
that was what I was going to ask you. So how does all those factors combine to make this extraordinary price? Because I think it opened at far less than 113. I mean, that sort of was an item that there was a lot of bidding on at that time.
I think we opened it at $5,000.
Yeah.
You know, so I said we haven't. You know, we've done a few drum sets in the past. You know, so I knew it had the celebrity aspect, and you know, we would get bids from that side of the room, but it was also a vintage drum set, you know, so we going to get bids against that. So if you started at the right price and just let those people kind of compete after it, go after it, you know, we ended up at 113,000 or something. But the drum set, it's a nice drum set. And just the fact that, I was in Johnny Carson's living room. So you had Johnny Carson fans going after it. You had Buddy Rich fans going after it, and you had vintage guys going after it. So that's kind of what we want. So when you can hit all three of those different bidding pools, it's nice.
I'm going to get to these here in a minute, but I'm also fascinated by the fact that, you know, you actually sort of gave me a few things here to talk about, because I'm fascinated by the fact that, you know, I was fortunate enough to get to work on the media release for the Bruce Springsteen guitars. You know, I love the fact, and we sold these I want to say that was in April as well.
Correct.
Time has sort of turned in on itself.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting to me that these guitars, when they come available from people who got them as a gift, and certainly that was gifted to a journalist, a biographer at the time. Mm-hmm. And Bob Dylan's guitars, certainly over, you know, how important is it when an instrument comes from a particular period in an artist's career?
It vary.
Yeah.
Like the guitar we sold for Bruce Springsteen, you know, his first two albums, kind of wrote on those guitars.
Some incredibly important songs, some incredibly important albums, incredible moments.
So I think it's a very big factor in it. So if you would have had a guitar that, say, Bruce Springsteen bought yesterday and had in his home for X amount of time, whatever it is. But I mean, if it's just a modern guitar that he bought just to kind of have around his house, it's not going to have the same value or the same importance as the guitar that he wrote those songs on and come up with, even though he could have bought a much more valuable guitar in terms of what the guitar is. The history comes into play, and that's where bidders come in.
Yeah. You know, to the vintage collector, you know, certainly we talked about the fact that Martins are incredibly important. The value, I assume, has gone up dramatically in the last couple of years.
We've been doing quite well with pre-war Martins. I mean, if you were lucky enough to get your hands on one, I mean, they're going to hold their value. So it's a good investment. And we have seen an uptick in bidding when we have vintage Martins, and the 34 and the 37 that we did the last two auctions, each did six figures, one for 118,000 and the other one for 281,000. So, and the 37 pretty much doubled what we thought it should do. You know, I think had it estimated at around 100,000, 120, opened the bidding at 15, you know, so get lots of people involved, and it worked out. You know, get people coming out of the woodwork for something like that, and people who know what it is. And you started at a level like that, you get people who might not even know what it is and say, well, it's a good enough price for that, you know, I'll take a risk. And then when it gets to a certain point, then you've got the people who really know what they're looking at and know what they want, and they went after it.
Somebody would like for you to talk about the 1950s Strats and Telecasters, about the how well they're doing, about how important they are to have to your collection, and about I assume that are you seeing an uptick in consignments of them as well of late?
I said Neal had a lot of them. You know, he had the choice ones. I mean, each one he had was in great condition. He had Strats of all different colors. Some were beat up, some weren't, some were in mint condition, but he had player grade Strats. They are the iconic instruments that you think of when you think of, you know, vintage instruments. Telecaster essentially started it all. You know, you've got broadcaster, things like that, but a Telecaster that's what you want. You know, you can play rock and roll with it, you can play country with it, and they've been doing well, and they hold their value as well, but they kind of set the benchmark, because there are a lot of Strats and a lot of Telecasters out there, and then when you get to the early ones, they start to thin out, and then when the condition and the originality is there also, the numbers that those set, they kind of set for the rest of the sale, the rest of the market, if you will, because that's what they're so iconic. People want a Stratocaster, people want a Telecaster.
So there is I mean, I assume that is the more famous a guitar, certainly the more valuable it's going to be. But that said, something like the Bigsby, which is a little bit more obscure for people, right? It's certainly a rarer, more vintage guitar. Who buys that? And because that Bigsby did extraordinarily well, it took me by surprise. Because I certainly figured that the '59 Burst is gonna kill it. Yeah. But when something a bit more obscure comes along, that's a different kind of collector, isn't it?
I mean, you're probably not playing that Bigsby. Yeah, that's got more of just a musical history to it. So I mean, they're well-built guitars by Paul Bigsby, so they're hand-built. And then the provenance we had with that guitar, we had correspondence from the original owner back and forth between Paul Bigsby. There's sales receipts, there's checks going back and forth. So the provenance on that was just immaculate. And I think that's just more of an important piece of history, if anything else, on a guitar like that. So
that Bigsby was a beautiful guitar.
Yeah, it's a beautiful guitar, and it kind of, it set the precedent for it. So Fender, if you will, kind of took that headstock and ran with it, but Paul Bigsby kind of came up with that traditional headstock that you see on a Fender Stratocaster, that Paul used that on his Bigsby guitars. And you just look at a Bigsby guitar and you could see all aspects of that design right now in Fenders and Gibsons, and just everybody kind of took it and ran with it. So it's a guitar like that is just a big, historically significant item.
People are taking a look at it right now. It's this. I'm always regret that I didn't come down to your office and look at to your warehouse. You don't office out of an office. Everybody here has an office. You actually work in kind of a workshop warehouse. If people got to see where you'd work, they'd be incredibly jealous.
Yeah, I'm in the back corner, but yeah, I enjoy it. So yeah, it's a guitar warehouse. So I'm around everything I work with, I love. So it's I couldn't ask for anything else.
I wish I came down to see it. That said, so I wanted to. So we have two guitars sitting next to me are actually in the upcoming auction. These are all in the upcoming auction. Obviously, they haven't sold. But this Gibson, this is a Trini Lopez, correct?
Trini Lopez, yeah. We did his estate a few months back, so he had a few of those that were his, personal guitars, prototypes. But that's just a circa '65 Trini Lopez. So it's just a cool guitar. So after Les Paul was kind of on his way out as being a signature artist for Gibson, they were looking for new artists to craft guitars after. They had a bunch of jazz artists, Johnny Smith, Bernie Kessel. So they were making those guitars, but they didn't really have any pop or radio friendly artists to model their guitars after. And they found Trini Lopez. So, and they started coming up with those, but it's unique as in it's got the diamond sound holes. And
so this is one of Trini's.
It's not one of Trini's. Okay. It's a signature model, but
no,
it was not owned by
we just sold
Lopez.
Several of Trini's from the estate, obviously.
We did, but this is from a different consignor, different collection, so it's not Trini's.
Does Dave Grohl know that this is available?
I'm not sure if he does, but we'll definitely make him available. But yeah, he's a fan of those.
I think he's played one of these on every single Foo Fighters album.
I don't know if it's actually a Trini Lopez that he plays, or if he's kind of got his own model going too.
No, I think it's a Trini.
Is it?
Yeah. Okay. I think and Noel Gallagher.
Okay.
From Oasis also plays one of these. This is I always love Trini's guitars. Trini being a Dallas native, somebody whose work I always loved and admired, and the fact that he got two signature guitars at Gibson always kind of astounds me.
Yeah, and traditional Gibsons kind of have the three on the side on the headstock, and that's got the 6 in a row, so quite unique to that. So,
what is something like this estimated at?
That's probably about a $5,000 to $6,000 guitar. So moderately priced, but a good player grade guitar, but it'll hold its value, and people are looking for them because they're not your traditional 335 style guitar. They vary with the diamond sound holes and subtle differences, but it's a 335 style guitar just with Trini's spin on it.
You've tuned this one, so you're free to play it, but I'm no stretch of anybody's imagination am I going to get anywhere near even trying to make a chord. So I have a question.
Sure.
Rickenbacker or Rickenbacker?
I pronounce it Rickenbacker. but tomato, to each their own.
As a kid, I always thought it was a Rickenbacker, but I have been set straight in recent years.
Rickenbacker.
So tell me about this one, other than the fact that this is obviously beautiful.
So it's a pretty early Rickenbacker. I think it's a 58 combo 800. It's in a pretty rare color finish. They call it the Cloverfield green. It's got some checking on it, which kind of makes it look pretty cool. But it's got a humbucker pickup, which is not super common for Rickenbacker, especially early Rickenbackers back in the day. But
so I wanted to ask you about that because of the pickups, and certainly guitars are altered all the time by those who play them, by folks who collect them, folks who take care of these. How much of the alteration to the guitars factors into the value? Certainly, if somebody has done something that no one has ever done to a particular model, does it add to or detract from its value?
Yeah, don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the main things. So if somebody's, I've got this guitar and I had it refinished, because I wanted to make it look shiny back when I was playing. Like that's a big no-no. Just don't mess with it. And even if you think it'll look shinier or you want to change the tuners, you can. If you're going to make any alterations you can change the tuners out, but just keep them. For God's sakes, keep the original pieces.
Yeah.
So the tuners, they start to give out, and they won't. Especially if you're playing it a lot and you want to take it on stage, and if it's falling out of tune, you might want to put some Grovers or some Scheller tuners on it, but keep the originals. So if you're going to resell it or, put it up for auction, we can advertise it as a completely original guitar. But people mess around with guitars. They'll put their own different pickups in it, add different switches, things like that. But in terms of the vintage market, you want an all original guitar. That's what's sought after. That's what people are looking to buy. If it's got, the frets, like again, if people are making it a playable guitar, in one hand, people can look at that and say, okay, it's got new frets. I'm going to play it. So I was going to do that anyway. Or on Martin, somebody might, shave the bridge down to get the action lower. But a lot of times people want their own guys to do that. So if you feel I've got something and maybe if I had this work done, it could sell for more, that might be a conversation you need to have with, Dave or I or somebody like that, because that might be the case. But it also, somebody might want it in original condition, and then they can have their own guy do the work and the quality of work that they know they're going to get from that versus somebody else has already done it and now you don't know. It could be a bad job type thing. So I'd advise you just leave it alone, keep it in original condition.
But that said, when somebody like a Neal Schon tinkers with a guitar, that probably adds, I assume, some value to or significance in that guitar. Correct.
Yeah. So the 77 Les Paul that we just sold, Don't Stop Believing guitar, that, he had his touch all over that guitar.
Right.
He's the first Les Paul, he says, to put a Floyd Rose in it, things like that. So it was routed out. It originally had P90s in it. He put humbuckers in it, but that's became his sound. And that guitar is related to, that album, that song, that things. And it's because of those changes that he made. So I think Irsay wasn't buying that guitar because he wanted a 77 Les Paul Deluxe. He's buying it because it was the Don't Stop Believing.
Right, because strangely enough, the 77 Les Paul is probably one of the least beloved of the Les Pauls. It's a heavy guitar.
It is, and yeah, that era kind of gets a bad rap for Les Pauls or Gibson in general. But they're fine guitars, they're quality guitars, and somebody like Neal Schon puts his spin on them, and mucks them up, or not mucks them up, but just customizes them. That becomes what's important on that instrument. Like the Eddie Van Halen Frankenstrats, those are, once he puts his hands on them and messes it up, or even when I say messes it up, that might have very well been the case. He's not a luthier by any means. So if he put a scratch in it or something like that, or made the route a little too big and kind of nasty looking, if you will, that's specific to him, and there's value in that.
So we've certainly seen an uptick in vintage guitars, the value of, the interest in. Are there guitars out there that remain for you sort of the holy grails in terms of what you'd like to get your hands on, what you'd like to be able to offer that you have not yet had the chance to do so? If somebody's holding something, who's watching right now, says, oh, I've got something you've never before seen, to your mind, what would something like that be?
I'm trying to think. Neal checked off a lot of boxes in this last.
Well, 112 guitars will do that.
Yeah, and just the condition of his guitars. But I would say I mean, I've seen a lot. So I would say just at this point, kind of condition. So if you've got, an early Martin, that's in untouched condition, that's the next level we kind of want to go after. Is
Yeah.
kind of untouched gems, if you will. So I don't know, but I would say, my go-to would be a 59 Les Paul, but we just did 2 of those, and I feel like it's embarrassing.
But
to
don't
say
you
that.
get addicted to it? I mean, when you get a 59 Les Paul, don't you want to sell another one immediately?
Oh yeah, no, it's very much. Yeah, you don't want to take any steps back, by any means. So we keep setting the bar higher and higher, and we're looking to expand on that. And that just means more work, harder work, but that's what we're here for. So if you can, this is my 3rd 59 Les Paul to sell since I've been doing vintage guitars here. So I haven't seen a 60. I know we've sold some. So if you've got any 60 Les Pauls, even a 58, like I said, I've only sold the 359. So
I was going to say, is there anything that the market is eager to get their hands on that that if collectors had it available to them would be that next sort of holy grail for them?
I think you're always going to be a Stratocaster. An early Stratocaster is always a safe bet. I think if you've got a nice no-caster, a broadcaster, or an early Blackguard Telecaster, those are highly sought after. We've seen a few of them, but people like them. So it's what people are looking for. So anything like that, and then again, condition. So if it's in immaculate condition or half of that, it's quite rare to see old guitars like that in the condition that at least Neal had them in. So it's kind of just jaw-dropping seeing old guitars in that condition.
I'm fascinated by the fact that I believe in the November auction, we're going to be offering George Jones's first childhood guitar. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
There's a book that just came out on the subject. So I get a million press releases a day about that book. And it always says in that release that Heritage will be offering this guitar in November.
We've got it. So yeah, we're going to get it to our photography department and kind of get that ball rolling. And we're still doing some research on it, but no, it's going to be a pretty exciting guitar. So this is childhood guitar, and there's a good story with that guitar. I think. I mean, it's had some work done, but because I think the story where he fell off the stage drunk with it. So that story. I mean, yeah, he broke the guitar, but there's a story to go with it. So it's just forget about the broken guitar part and just add that story in, and it's George Jones's childhood guitar. With those nicks and dings and the story to go along with it. It's should be exciting.
Well, I mean, you certainly, if Willie Nelson's guitar was ever to come available, you certainly want it with a big hole in it. So
yeah, no, that'll be something special. So yeah, back to the question before that. If you've got Willie Nelson's guitar,
I think Willie has it.
Yeah, if you want to consign Willie, that'd be something special. So it holds a place in my heart too.
Look, I'm fascinated by the fact that some of these guitars that come through here, I always go, that's a rock and roll Hall of Fame kind of piece. I mean, I think about the Hammett 1 guitar, I think about Neal's guitar, and I'm glad Ursay bought it to put into a museum eventually.
Yeah.
There are a lot of incredibly museum quality pieces here. I mean, this is American art for musicians.
Oh yeah. And we've got a Gene Krupa drum set coming up in November.
Really?
Yep.
I was unaware of this. How exciting.
Slingerland. So I think the drum set's got value on its own, but it was Gene's. So it's got the big, GK on it, Slingerland, just like similar to the Buddy Rich one we did. Also got another Buddy Rich Slingerland. So
really?
We'll have 3 drum kits in this sale.
Wow.
Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and then Terry Bozzio's. So.
From Frank Zappa and Missing Persons.
So we've got it's a huge, elaborate set. Too big we can't even have it in-house. So we're going to be shipping from the consignor's house. But
Terry Bozzio's drum kit?
Correct.
It's too big to have in-house in this enormous warehouse of the space of ours?
It's huge. It's probably, I'm going to have to go back and count it. But I mean, it's a 40-piece drum set.
It's like Neil Peart big.
Yeah, Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and he's kind of signed on each one of the heads on there. So there's a lot of signatures on there. So if you buy it, you can break it up and sell it via signatures, or you've got, one of the most elaborate drum kits to be around. So,
that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
So you, unlike many of the folks here, actually get to go to guitar shows.
Yep. I'll be in Orange County, Costa Mesa next weekend. So the 27th, 28th, there's a guitar show there. So if you're in the area, come by, do free appraisals. We're still taking consignments, so we can do everything right there. Get you taken care of.
And I'm assuming there's a guitar show in Dallas. There seems to be one every other week.
The next one coming up, it's Guitarlington in October
Guitarlington.
October 17th or so, that weekend. It's going to be at the Arlington Convention Center. It's just back to Arlington now. We're doing it in Fort Worth, which was not the best in my opinion, but now it's back to Fort Worth, which is one, closer to Dallas, and two, without the smell of the stockyards.
Now you get the view of the ballpark.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. So we got 2 shows coming up, taking consignments on both of those. So, yep.
Well, if anybody has any questions for you after this, and I'm assuming people probably do, it's aaronp@ha.com.
That's correct.
They can call you. They can come to the website. Certainly, I assume you're adding pieces to the November auction every day at this point.
We're still working, yep, until September 9th, I think, is when we're going to cut it off. So if you've got anything, give me a call, shoot me an email, and we'll get you going, see what you got.
Well, I really appreciate you doing this. This has been a lot of fun for me. This is, again, it's tempting to want to strum one of these things, but I won't even do it after you leave the room.
Yeah.
But thanks, man. This has been it's great that you are always full of thoughtfulness, insight, and revelations about these things. And I will say that when I bring folks back to see you, you're one of the folks here that get the most excited to meet. You're behind many locked doors. So when they finally make it back to the Guitar Warehouse and they see what you've got back there, and in cases, when we sold Neal stuff, all of Neal's stage played guitars had the Journey cases, the traveling cases.
Yeah, and stuff like that. I mean, again, it's part of the history, part of the provenance, just the Journey stencil that they, it's used. It's the real deal.
And Reverend Horton Heat's guitar recently used on his first album.
Yep, and the suit he's wearing on the Smoke 'em If You Got 'em. So
Yeah.
sold his Jazz Master, and the suit he's wearing on that, which he came in, it's cool to meet people like that. And it's nice when you hear it straight from the horse's mouth, if you will, but if you get it with the consignment directly from the artist, that's always special.
Well, it's nice to know that they come to Heritage, and they come to Heritage because of you.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's the case, but I certainly appreciate it. So, and we'll help anybody out who comes in. So we're always here. So,
well, I appreciate everybody watching. I'm sure we'll do one of these again before or after November. But Aaron, thanks.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.